Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're digging into something quite special. It's a story built from old letters, the flimsy airmail kind.
That's right. We're looking at the memoir Foreign Correspondence, and it's fascinating how it traces this path.
Yeah, how a young girl's childhood pen pal letters, found years later, actually turned out to be the blueprint for her entire adult life as a foreign correspondent.
Exactly. It's this quest, really. She uses these letters, these projections onto strangers to map her world. And then years later, she goes looking for them
To find out who they really were.
and what their lives could teach her about things like stability, longing, what home even means. So our mission today is to follow that journey, look at the gap between the fantasy she built and the reality she found.
Okay, let's start where the book starts, the discovery moment. It's quite evocative. She's in her parents' basement in Sydney, hot day.
Yeah, unfinished dirt floor, tea chests everywhere. And the reason she's there is sad, actually. Her father, Laurie, is very ill. So she's sorting through his life, basically.
And Laurie was this figure,
Hmm.
known for his voice, right?
Yeah.
A singer, a radio personality.
Absolutely. Big band singer in Hollywood, then a huge radio star in Australia. His voice was his identity, his fortune, but now illness has silenced him completely.
Wow. So she's there sorting through his things and feeling this sense of regret that she didn't ask him more.
Definitely. That sense of too late, realizing she never really got the full story of his, pretty chaotic life.
And the things he kept. It wasn't just family stuff, was it?
No, far from it. That's what's so revealing. Amongst the photos and clippings, there's just boxes and boxes of correspondence. It shows Laurie never really stopped engaging with the world, even after he stepped back from the limelight.
He was writing to everyone.
Pretty much. It's this amazing mix. You've got like a little two-line note from Albert Einstein in verse, responding to some silly thing Laurie sent him.
Einstein. Seriously.
Seriously. But then right alongside that, you find serious stuff. A reply from the White House Council of Economic Advisors about interest rates in '69. A letter from Rupert Murdoch in '74 about the best way to fold a newspaper so it doesn't crease.
Okay, hold on. Einstein and newspaper folding. How did that fit together?
I think that's the key, isn't it? He was this combination, part restless intellectual, reaching out globally, part almost obsessive about tiny details, quirky, definitely, always seeking connection, always thinking.
That mix of the grand and the granular, that feels important for understanding the family dynamic?
It really is. It sets the stage for the author's own journey, that blend of big ideas and very specific personal needs.
Which brings us to the discovery that really kicks off the memoir's core journey, hidden in one of those chests.
Yeah, near the bottom, a thick pile of those brittle blue airmail letters, all addressed to her, her own pen pal letters, from 1966 to 1979, held together with an old rubber band.
And the crucial thing is, he saved them. Her father. The one she describes as often detached, maybe a bit absent-minded.
Exactly. It's incredibly poignant that he, amongst all his important papers and memories, kept her childhood longings safe. It suggests he saw, maybe more than she realized, her deep desire for something more, something beyond Sydney.
It's like tangible proof of her ambition, her search for elsewhere.
Absolutely, and that's what we're going to unpack. That stark contrast between her world, 1960s suburban Sydney, quite contained, and the massive world she is reaching for through these letters. The U.S., Israel, France, the U.K.
And how that map she drew as a kid became the actual itinerary of her life.
Okay, so to really feel why she needed that elsewhere, you have to picture the Sydney she grew up in. It wasn't the, glamorous harbor city we think of now.
Right, she lived on Bland Street in Ashfield. Westward sprawl, she calls it. Lower middle class.
Very much so. Hot, dry plains. They were in this Victorian terrace house, totally wrong for the climate, really designed for London or Dublin, and crucially, no car.
Which in those sprawling suburbs,
Yeah.
that basically meant you were stuck.
Right. Pretty much. Getting anywhere, even to the famous beaches or the harbor, was a major undertaking. A whole expedition on buses. Her physical world was quite limited.
And the cultural climate, what was that like?
She paints a picture of post-war Australia as quite timid, very conservative. The news was all intensely local.
Like worrying about bacteria counts at the beach instead of Vietnam.
Exactly that kind of thing. An inward focus, maintaining this safe, stable, very white suburban ideal was the priority.
And that fed into this cultural cringe.
Yeah.
What exactly was that?
It was this deep-seated feeling, apparently quite common then, that Australian culture was inherently second-rate, descended from convicts. So For anything real art ideas validation, you had to look overseas, specifically to Britain.
How did you see that play out,
Yeah.
like in daily life?
Oh, it was everywhere. People planting English flowers like primroses that would just wilt and die in the Sydney heat, ignoring amazing native plants, portraits of the Queen on the wall, big, heavy Christmas dinners in blazing summer.
Following the British model even when it made no sense.
Totally. Even the universities modeled themselves on Oxford and Cambridge. Took them until the 60s to even have a professor of Australian literature. The whole atmosphere screamed, if you want to do something important, if you're ambitious, you have to leave. Real life happens elsewhere.
But her own drive came from somewhere. And the book suggests her parents, Gloria and Laurie, provided a kind of stable launch pad, despite the constraints. Especially Laurie's backstory.
Oh, absolutely. Laurie Brooks wasn't always Laurie Brooks. He was born Bob Cutter in California in 1907. He was a proper big band singer, Hollywood, Hawaii, the whole scene in the 30s.
Wow. So how did he end up in Sydney?
Got stranded there in 38, came with a band. The leader apparently scarpered with all the money. So suddenly, he's stuck. And it forced this huge change in him.
He ditched the Hollywood dream.
Completely. It seems he embraced this idea of Australian collectivism. He joined the AIF entertainment unit during the war, found community there. Afterwards, he could have gone back to being a big star. But he chose, well, proofreading. Stability, union solidarity, mateship.
Why?
Yeah.
Why walk away from potential fame?
It turns out later there was scandal involved, which we'll get to, but also a deep fear. His own father, Winthrop Cutter, died young at 54, apparently due to alcoholism. Laurie, or Bob as he was then, seemed determined not to repeat that. He chose family, predictability over the risks of fame.
And Gloria, the mother, she sounds like the powerhouse.
She really does. Fiercely resilient. Her family lost their home in the Depression, so she knew hardship. Her own education got cut short, but she poured all that intellectual energy into her daughter.
Teaching her Shakespeare.
Yeah, using Portia's speech on mercy for debate practice, setting up a chemistry lab on the veranda, and crucially teaching her to spot cant hypocrisy, empty rhetoric. Essential skills for a journalist.
So definitely. So you have this small physical world, but these parents who, in their own ways, fostered a bigger mental world.
And that yellow mailbox was key. Laurie's connection to his elsewhere. And then the pen pal letters became her connection. Her tangible proof that a wider world existed beyond Bland Street. #Tech3, Early Identities, and the American Magnet, 1966-1972. So her first attempt to connect outwards was actually quite close by, geographically speaking, but still, across a big divide, her first pen pal was Sunny.
Right. Real name Laura, or Nell, the daughter of Ross Campbell, the newspaper columnist.
Exactly, and the Campbells lived on the North Shore across the Harbor Bridge, which in 60s Sydney wasn't just a location, it was a symbol.
Of what? Money, class.
All of that. Affluence, better schools, leafy streets. Compared to the author's western suburbs, it was a different world. Even though the Campbells projected this kind of Aussie battler image in the columns, the address itself spoke volumes about privilege.
And Sunny Nell had these glamorous ambitions, musical comedy, went to a fancy school that encouraged it.
Right, Abbottsley. Meanwhile, the author's at St. Mary's, a Catholic school, where her sister got marked down in art because the nuns worried about her meeting bad types in the art world.
Wow. So Nell represented a kind of creative freedom the author didn't have access to.
Totally. They wrote about sleepovers and fashion, typical teenage stuff, but the underlying opportunities, the assumptions about their futures were just worlds apart.
Okay, so when that connection didn't quite fulfill the need, she turned inward and found Star Trek.
Oh, did she ever. Star Trek hit Sydney in 67, and it became this massive identity project for her. She didn't just watch it, she decided to be Mr. Spock.
Like literally.
Pretty much. She describes the basin haircut, trying to pluck her eyebrows like him, but it was more than cosmetic. It was about embracing logic. She taught herself syllogisms. And because Spock was the science officer, she figured she had to be good at math, even though she wasn't naturally.
So she learned logarithms before long division.
That's the story. It was this intense effort to impose Vulcan rationality onto her, well, somewhat less logical suburban life.
But her dad wasn't having it, apparently. The final frontier rant.
Oh, that's such a brilliant detail. It apparently happened regularly. Laurie, maybe after a couple of drinks, would hear Shatner's voiceover. Space! The final frontier.
And he'd lose it.
He'd apparently get quite worked up, shaking his head at the TV, saying, it isn't, what about the human brain? We're only using 1%. That's the final bloody frontier.
So even as she's looking outward to space, he's pointing inward to the mind.
Exactly. It's this perfect clash of their perspectives. His grounded, maybe slightly tipsy philosophy versus her escapist fantasy.
That outward fantasy really crystallized with her American pen pal, though.
Yeah.
Joanne from Maplewood, New Jersey. She became the real magnet.
She really did. They found they had so much in common, both late children of older parents, both loved science fiction Wyndham, Bradbury, both played the recorder.
And Joanne got the Star Trek thing, too.
Totally. Signed off, live long and prosper. They even headed their letters with fake star dates. They were companions on this imaginary big trip elsewhere.
Joanne seemed to represent everything their author felt Australia lacked, right? Sophistication, opportunity.
Yeah, Joanne's brother was studying molecular biology at Stanford. That sounded incredibly glamorous and serious compared to Sydney. America just felt like the place where important things happened.
And this big trip elsewhere, it wasn't just a personal fantasy, was it? It was a real cultural thing for Australians back then.
Very real. If you were bright and ambitious, particularly in the arts or academia, it was almost expected that you had to go overseas, usually the UK or the US, to kind of prove yourself. Finish your education, culturally speaking.
She describes the emotional scenes at the docks when the liners left. The streamers breaking.
Yeah, that ritual symbolized the break, sending your best and brightest off to the real world. Joanne, being American, was already in that world. She represented the destination.
Okay, so America is locked in as the future goal. But then her search takes this sharp turn towards ideology, didn't it? Sparked by the Six-Day War in '67.
Yes, and fueled by her father's own passionate Zionism. Laurie was apparently a lifelong supporter of Israel, so the author just dives into this new identity.
With her usual intensity, I imagine.
Completely. Reading Leon Uris, Anne Frank, wearing a Star of David pendant to her Catholic school, which must have raised some eyebrows.
And trying to turn the backyard into a kibbutz.
Huh, yes. Trying to make her mother's vegetable garden rugged and productive, apparently almost causing soil erosion in the process. It was this romanticized vision of pioneering, of collective effort. So different from suburban Sydney.
So she writes off to Israel, looking for, what did she say, a goddamn Jew.
That was the phrase. But the person who writes back isn't quite what she expected.
Not at all. She gets Mishal, an Israeli Arab, a Christian from Nazareth.
Talk about complicating the narrative. Her fantasy involved, like, rough-hewn pioneers. Michel's father was a French polisher, a skilled, sophisticated craftsman. That detail alone kind of shattered her stereotype.
How did she react initially? Must have been a shock.
It seems like it was, but the effect was immediate. Michel's letters were just normal, curious about her life, clearly living comfortably within Israel. He wasn't a political statement, he was a person.
And he became a successful tradesman later on.
Yeah, it turns out he built a really good life for himself. Independent, integrated, moving easily between Jewish and Arab communities. He completely defied her simple ideological categories.
So that search didn't quite work out as planned. She tried again, though, to find that specific identity.
She did. Made sure to mention Judaism as an interest this time. And she got Cohen.
Cohen. The dull Israeli, as she calls him.
Pretty much. He was on paper what she thought she wanted. A Sabra born in Israel from a Yemenite family who were actually part of Israel's underclass then living on a moshav near Tel Aviv.
But his letters
were all about local sports. Football, basketball, hanging out at the beach. He was completely disconnected from the international culture, the ideas she was interested in.
He was basically like the Australian boys she was trying to get away from.
Exactly. Same kind of parochial interest, just in a different country. It drove home that, location or label doesn't guarantee intellectual connection. It's about the individual curiosity, which Cohen seemed to lack.
Okay, so Israel yielded complexity, not the simple ideology she sought. Then she turned her focus to France. Why France?
France represented something else, not ideology, but deep culture. Old and arrogant, she says, serene in its own superiority. It felt like the ultimate source of sophistication.
And her mother had laid the groundwork for that.
Yeah, with the Shop de Chapeau game, playing it being French. Then she started learning French in 1968, the year of the student protests in Paris. So she imagined revolutionaries' intellectual ferment.
But her pen pal, Janine, wasn't exactly storming the barricades.
Not quite. Janine was from Saint-Martin-de-la-Bresque, tiny village, population 516. Her dad was a farmhand. Again, reality bumping up against the fantasy.
What were Janine's letters like?
Grammatically perfect, that famous French education system. But culturally, well, not what the author expected.
No.
She loved Brigitte Bardot, had never heard of Dustin Hoffman or Leonard Cohen, figures the author idolized. And when the author hinted about maybe experimenting with things.
Like the marijuana she was growing in the garden.
Exactly. Janine's response was basically that only idiots did drugs. Very pragmatic, very sensible. It was another reality check. The place the author imagined as radically sophisticated was, for Janine, just home. Stable, maybe a bit conventional.
So all these teenage projections, these maps drawn onto letters, they eventually led somewhere very real. She gets a scholarship to Columbia Journalism School in '82.
Fulfilling that American dream, yeah. And her career just takes off, ends up as the Middle East correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, covering 22 countries.
Living the life she mapped out, literally, following those addresses.
It's an incredible convergence. But the reality of being a foreign correspondent, especially then, in that region, it wasn't the romantic escape she might have imagined as a kid.
No, it sounds intense. She talks about her packing list.
Yeah, it's wild. A king suit, a Shador, a copy of Proust, right next to antibiotics, needles, and a bulletproof vest. That tells you everything, doesn't it?
And the #1 rule she learned.
Never get in the middle. Always make sure you're behind one side or the other in a conflict. Cuts your risk in half. Very pragmatic, very calculated. Not exactly idealistic adventure.
But the really profound insights came when she went back, as an adult, to find the actual people behind the letters, starting with Joannie.
Joannie, the American mirror. And this is where it gets incredibly sad. Just as the author gets the news about her Columbia scholarship, she hears from Joannie's mother, Elizabeth. Joannie had died, 1982.
Died from what the book calls it, a metabolic catastrophe.
Which sounds like the long-term consequences of anorexia nervosa. Joannie's struggles started way back, late 72, early 73. Severe weight loss, hospitalization. It was something people in Australia barely even knew about then.
And the letters revealed a very different picture from the free, sophisticated American life the author had imagined.
Completely different. Joannie's reality seems to have been one of intense internal pressure. The author mentions an emotional absentee father, an overprotective, overconcerned mother. All that supposed freedom was masking deep unhappiness, shame, depression.
So the envy the author felt was totally misplaced.
Utterly. Joannie survived an overdose attempt in 73, tried college again, but the illness, the anorexia, just ground her down over years. The metabolic catastrophe was likely heart failure or something similar, caused by the long-term starvation.
And the author eventually meets Joannie's mother.
Yes. Years later, 1993, on Martha's Vineyard, and Elizabeth tells her something staggering. She says Joannie had always wanted to be the author. She wanted that adventurous life, that boldness.
Wow, so the person the author idolized actually idolized her back for the very qualities the author felt she lacked growing up.
It's a devastating irony, isn't it? The author felt she had to escape Sydney to find freedom, but it turns out the psychological stability she got from her seemingly boring Sydney parents was exactly what Joannie, in her supposedly free American life, desperately needed and didn't have.
That is quite a realization.
Yeah.
Okay, what about Nell, the Sydney girl who did seem to achieve the glamorous elsewhere?
Right. Nell, a.k.a. Sunny. She tracks her down in New York, and Nell has become this huge icon. Owner of the famous nightclub Nell's, which opened in '87, capitalizing on her fame from the Rocky Horror Show. She's basically Queen of Night.
Living the dream, you'd think.
You would. But when the author meets her, Nell is surprisingly Australian. Very sensible, hardworking, practical, underneath the glamour.
Like drinking Perrier at her own nightclub.
Exactly. Because, as Nell apparently said, famous people are all drinking Perrier and worrying about what everyone thinks of them. It was all quite managed, quite pragmatic.
And did Nell seem happy with that life?
Here's the kicker. Nell expressed this real nostalgia, this longing for their childhood in Sydney. The very childhood the author fled. Nell missed the supposed freedom of just running around, never seeing their parents except at mealtimes.
So the one who got the fame missed the simple life, and the one who had the simple life craved the adventure Joannie had envied. It's all tangled.
Completely tangled, which makes the return to the Middle East, pen pals, Cohen and Michal, even more interesting. Seeing them in person in the 90s really tested those old ideological ideas.
Okay, Cohen first. The goddamn Jew she finally connected with. What was he like as an adult?
He was a poultry farmer, still living near where his childhood moshav was, though it was now part of a bigger town. Still quite shy, awkward, physically strong, but seemed very contained. Insular.
Did he seem engaged with the complexities of Israel?
Not really. When the author mentioned she was going to Nazareth, just a couple of hours away, Cohen said he'd never been. Never. His reason? Why would I go? I don't know anyone in Nazareth, but still they are Arabs. Just this vague anxiety. His wife, who is Yemenite like him, but much more outgoing, did all the talking. He wasn't the dynamic nation builder she or her father might have imagined.
And Michel, the Arab correspondent who surprised her initially.
Michel was the complete opposite. Warm, welcoming, instantly invited her into his family's busy apartment in Nazareth. He'd become a very successful French polisher, made a conscious choice not to use his engineering degree because he knew, as an Israeli Arab who hadn't done military service, he'd hit a glass ceiling in big companies.
So he carved his own path.
Yeah, entrepreneurial. And he was thriving. He spoke really positively about life in Israel, the standard of living, the freedom of speech, and he moved effortlessly between Jewish clients, Arab clients, Palestinian contacts, completely integrated, completely at ease in that complex society.
So Michel, the unexpected one, actually embodied a kind of successful cosmopolitan Israeli life more than Cohen did.
In many ways, yes. He represented the nuanced reality that had totally bypassed the author's, and maybe her father's, more black-and-white ideological framework.
Which brings us to the final pen pal, Janine in France, the symbol of serene cultural stability. Did she find her still there?
She did. Tracked her down in Saint-Martin-de-la-Brasque in 1995. Janine's childhood home was gone, but Janine herself was very much there, rooted.
What was her life like?
Married to a local builder, raising 3 sons, seeing the same women she grew up with at the school bus stop every day. Her father was still around, gathering firewood from old vineyards. It was a life defined by continuity, by staying put.
And after all the author's adventures, covering wars, living globally, how did Janine's quiet life strike her?
She found it, quote, most enviable. Which seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, after chasing risk and excitement for decades.
Yeah.
Why envy the quiet life?
This leads to a really interesting psychological idea the author explores, the happiness set point. The theory is basically that most people have a kind of default level of happiness or contentment. Big events, winning the lottery, suffering a loss might shift it temporarily, but we tend to drift back to our baseline.
Okay, so how does that apply here?
The author realizes that her life of adventure was her way of maintaining her set point, the stimulation, the challenge that nourished her baseline. But Janine achieved the same thing, maintaining her baseline through stability, community, the small rhythms of village life, living between the baguette and the beurre, as the author beautifully puts it.
So neither life is inherently better. They're just different strategies for reaching that same internal equilibrium.
Exactly. And that insight sheds new light on her father, Laurie. His big life change, becoming Laurie Brooks instead of Bob Cutter. It wasn't just about swapping names, it was about escaping a scandal.
A scandal? What happened?
Remember the glamorous Hollywood life? Well, there's a woman, Ruby, mentioned in his notes. She was married to someone powerful. There was an affair, a messy divorce. It effectively stalled Bob Cutter's career.
Ah. So choosing the quiet life as Laurie Brooks wasn't just about fearing his father's fate. It was also about actively choosing stability after the chaos of fame and scandal.
Precisely. He chose a life that could sustain his happiness set point, focusing on family and predictability rather than chasing applause. And the author realizes, looking back, how lucky she was to have had that settled version of her father, the one who had time for her, who provided that bedrock.
That stability became her launch pad, the invisible armor she took out into the world.
That's the core realization. The pen pals started as these helpless ciphers, just screens for her own projections, her need for escape. Following their addresses led her around the world, but the ultimate destination was understanding the value of where she started.
And she finds herself in the end living a quieter life too, right? In Virginia.
Yes, baking bread, raising her son. A life much closer in some ways to Janine's than to her own past as a correspondent. She lived the life Joanne wanted, the adventure, but found the deepest contentment looked more like Janine's stability.
It's a powerful full circle, which leaves us with something for you, our listeners, to think about. The author journeyed outward to find elsewhere, only to truly appreciate here.
So the question for you is, if you trace your own map, your own journey away from perhaps where you started, which of these lives resonates most with what you actually value now? Is it the fame and nostalgia Nell represented, the tragic potential Joanne embodied, the quiet stability of Janine, or the complex, integrated success of Michel?
Think about which fantasy guided you and which reality holds most value for you today. What does your own map of identity reveal about the destination you truly seek?